Hi, and welcome back to this week's Parshat Shir on Sefer Maayan Beit Hashoeva of Rav Shimon Schwab. We began studying this wonderful Sefer a couple of weeks ago. As we completed our first full cycle of Nesivos Shalom, we transition now to studying Maayan Beit Hashoeva. I'd like to share with you two small snippets from Rav Schwab on this week's Parsha of Toldot. The first is on the beginning of the Parsha. Parsha opens, Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avraham, Avraham Holidus Yitzchak. These are the generations, the offspring of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham, Avraham bore Yitzchak. Many questions on this piece of the pasuk. First of all, if the Torah is about to tell us the Toldos, the generations of Yitzchak ben Avraham, it should have straight away gone into telling us about the birth of Yaakov and Esav, and instead it doesn't tell us about the birth of Yitzchak's children, it tells us about the birth of Yitzchak himself, Avram Holius Yitzchak. Furthermore, if the pasuk is going to tell us that it's Yitzchak ben Avraham is his name, so why does it then need to reinforce again Avram Holius Yitzchak, that Avram bore Yitzchak? So that second question is answered by Rashi, by Chazal, telling us that perhaps the Leitzanei Hador used to mock Yitzchak and pretend that he was not the son of Avraham, that perhaps Sarah, when she was with Avimelech, was impregnated and bore the son Yitzchak, and to counter that possibility, Hashem made a miracle that Yitzchak's face was very similar to Avram's, so everyone who encountered him would say, "Oh, Avram Holidus Yitzchak." It's very clear, very obvious, countering the opinion of the Leitzanei Hador that Avram was the father of Yitzchak, and that's what's being reinforced parenthetically in the pasuk. But it's the first question I asked that Maayan Beit Hashoeva addresses himself to. If we're about to read Eila Toldos Yitzchak, why doesn't the Torah jump in after telling us that these are the generations of Yitzchak to teach us about Yaakov and Esav? First it interrupts and it tells us the lineage of Yitzchak himself, Avram Holius Yitzchak. In the next pasuk it tells us the lineage of Rivka. And after telling us the lineage of Rivka and of Yitzchak, then the Torah finally returns to tell us the punchline, which is Toldos Yitzchak, the generations, the progeny of Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Esav. Maayan Beit Hashoeva says, Rashi, Yaakov Esav Hamurim B'Parsha, that the Toldos refer to Yaakov and Esav. V'mishal Hashoel, if a person was going to ask, Shelafi Zeh Yiksha Lama Mafsik B'Yuchusam Shel Yitzchak V'Rivka Ad Leidas Yaakov Esav, if someone would ask the question we just asked, which is why does the Torah interrupt the flow of Toldos Yitzchak about Yaakov and Esav with the genealogy of Yitzchak and Rivka themselves? Afatay Morlo, you should say back, Shaharei Zeh Ba'Lamed, Ki Sikum Yemei Chaye Ha'adam Eino Maschil B'Leidaso Ela Bizivu Avosav. Very beautiful point. The person could retort and say, we learn from this structuring of our Parsha that the end point of the description of the life of an individual, the starting point for that description, is not with their birth, but rather with the lineage and birth of their parents. L'rabos yichusei ha'av v'ha'em, v'kolos mana ha'rayon ad sheroa havlad es avir ha'olam, including the birth of their parents, the life of their parents, the period of pregnancy, all the way up until their birth. That's the beginning of the story. V'sipur Toldos Yitzchak, the story of the generations of Yitzchak, of Klomar, Yaakov and Esav, Amurim Parsha, Yaakov and Esav were spoken about in the rest of the Parsha. The description of Yaakov and Esav, Maschel Miyad Pasuk Avram Holius Yitzchak. It actually does begin right after the words Eila Toldos Yitzchak ben Avraham. These are the generations of Yitzchak ben Avraham. We were expecting to hear, Yaakov and Esav. But no, we are hearing about Yaakov and Esav immediately afterwards, because to know about Yaakov and Esav, you have to know about Yitzchak and Rivka. And so Eila Toldos Yitzchak ben Avraham, to tell us the Toldos of Yitzchak ben Avram, who are Yaakov and Esav, it has to begin by telling us Avram Holius Yitzchak, and here's Rivka's lineage. That knowledge that our story, the story of us, begins in our parents' time, is a Musar Haskel, L'chol HaMetaplim B'Shiduchim, is a very important lesson for anyone who deals with making Shiduchim. Shetarich lechapes lo rak hatzlachas hazug hatzayir shalata, elo lahakir v'leida shemisasik b'atzlachas binyan shel doros habayim v'hemshech min doros hakodmin. Any person involved in making matches and setting up shidduchim has to understand their responsibility is not just to the couple, it's to all future generations. Because all future generations, when telling their story, will date it back to this couple. And even further back, to this couple's parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. We're all part of this great continuum. We're all part of this great chain, a familial chain and a national chain, to understand that our life story doesn't begin with us, and it doesn't end with us. It begins with the generations that come before, and it ends with many, 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 hopefully, generations that will come afterwards. Beautiful lesson, implicit just in a couple of words of the beginning of the Parsha. Fast forwarding a little bit, Rivka finds herself unable to have children, speaking of this chain of continuity. And she davens, and Yitzchak davens very beautifully for a child. And I think I want to share another piece from Maayan Beit Hashoeva, which I believe is connected to the first one as well. Pasuk says, Vayater Yitzchak laHashem lenochach ishto ki akarahi, Vayater lo Hashem v'atarif ka'ishto. Yitzchak prays with great fervor to Hashem in front of his wife because she's barren, and Hashem answers his prayers and causes Rivka to become pregnant. Rashi, quoting from the Medrash Rabbah, very beautifully and famously tells us, As when the Torah tells us that he's praying lenochach ishto, facing his wife, it meant they were both praying. They were both praying for the same thing. He was praying in one corner of the room, she was praying in another corner of the room. They become united in their prayers to Hashem. The strange part is vaya'ater lo, that the pasuk tells us that Hashem specifically answered the prayers of Yitzchak. If the Medrash is claiming that they're both davening, and the Medrash is claiming they're even both davening in the same room, parallel to each other, so it makes it even more surprising that the pasuk highlights that Yitzchak is the one who's answered. Not only that, but the Gemara in Yevamos makes the question even stronger, because it tells us that there was a reason why Hashem specifically answered Yitzchak. Vaya'ater lo, she'ein domet tfilas tzadik ben tzadik l'tfilas tzadik ben rasha, lefichach lo velo la. Because you can't compare, says the Gemara, the davening, the tefillah of a tzaddik ben tzaddik like Yitzchak, who had a father like Abraham, to the davening of tzaddik ben rasha, tzaddikis bas rasha, like Rivka, who may have been a great righteous woman in her own right, but she was the daughter of a wicked man. And therefore, the Torah tells us that Hashem answered him and not her. Very, very jarring Gemara, very strange Gemara. I have many, many thoughts on this particular Gemara and how to read it. All the Mefarshim struggle. How do you make sense of that? Everything we know about the status of Baalei Tshuva is that they're perhaps even higher and even greater level than a tzaddik from birth. Baal Tshuva has overcome their environment, is able to reach even higher levels of spirituality than someone who never had that struggle. In fact, the previous psukim describing Rivka say she's Bas Besuel, Achos Lavan, Aramim, Padan Aram, describes her whole lineage connected to Besuel and Lavan and Padan Aram. And the Medrash there says the reason why the Torah goes out of its way to say that is to show us that she's such a tzaddikus. Despite her environment, despite her surroundings, despite her family, she didn't get sucked into that vortex. She raised herself above that and became her own person who was an incredible tzaddikus. So that strengthens our question. How could it be the Torah highlights how great a tzaddikus she is? In the next pasuk, according to Gemara Yevamos, she's not answered because she doesn't have great lineage. Her tefillos are not as powerful. So everyone struggles to answer up this question. Maayan Beit Hashoeva answers in a particularly interesting way, and I think it's connected to the previous vort that I set out for him. So he answers as follows: V'yitachin levayer. Perhaps we could say, Sheshnei dvarim halalu tluyim ze bazeh. Maybe the tefillah outcome, in this case for a child, is intrinsically connected to their lineage, whether coming from tzaddikim or from rishayim. Shehatam shehitztarchu lispal ko echad bezavish shelo mishpnei shetfiloseim ayu chalukos biyasodan. The reason why perhaps the Medrash describes them davening in different corners of the room, or according to the Medrash, the pasuk describes them as davening in different corners of the room, is because the mahus, the content, the nature of their tefillah was entirely different. Shetfilas Yitzchak haita tfilas tzadik ben tzadik, because the tefillah of Yitzchak, who was a righteous person, the son of a righteous person, utfilas Rivka haita tfilas tzadik ben rasha, whereas the tefillah of Rivka was the tefillah of a righteous person, the daughter of a wicked person. Why does that change the nature of their tefillah? Ubir ha'inyan shikshet tzadik ben tzadik mispalel al habanim harehu mispalel shuyula lo ben ka'aviv. When the righteous person from righteous lineage, Yitzchak in this case, is davening for a child, what do they really have in their mind? What's the image that's in their mind when they're davening with great fervor for a righteous child? They're davening that they should have a child in the same mold and image as their parent. They have a model in mind of something that they're hoping for, something that they're aspiring to. They're asking Hashem, please grant me that in my children. V'zeu bichlal derech hateva. And that's the normal way of things, that you want your children to be modeled after your parents. That's a more low bar request. My parents were like that. Hopefully I'm like that. And my children should be like that as well. Aval kshetzadik ben Rasha mispala habanim harei mevakesh sheyulad lo ben shelo yeh ka'aviv harasha. But when a tzaddik ben Rasha, a tzaddik was not from a righteous lineage, is davening for a child, A, they don't have an image in their mind of what they're actually looking for, and B, they're actually asking Hashem, Zeu davar shelo kederach hateva. They're asking for something that goes against nature. It's the nature of things, that a parent is a certain way, and their child is a certain way, and the grandchild, everyone follows the same line. Now the tefillah is that they're asking Hashem to reverse that, to reverse the natural order and say, I don't want my progeny to be like where I came from. I want it to be different. Therefore, their tefillos were different. What they were asking for is different. And therefore, they took up different corners of the room. The tefillah of Yitzchak, A, was much clearer because he had an image of what he was asking for, and was much easier, quote unquote, to fulfill because he was just asking Hashem to carry on in the natural order of things. The tefillah of Rivka was much more difficult to attain. Number one, she didn't have an image in her mind of what she was actually asking for. She didn't have a model to follow. And secondly, she was asking Hashem to accomplish something much more, quote unquote, difficult, something that was the reversal of the natural order. ולאור זה אולי יש לומר שמה שאמרו חז"ל שתפילת צדיק בן צדיק נענס קודם אין זה בכלל כל התפילות, אלא רק שמספלו הבנים שאז נענס תפילת צדיק בן צדיק מפני שאינו מבקש דבר שהוא נגד הטבע. Maybe that answers the Gemara in Yevamos. Gemara in Yevamos is not saying in general that the tefillah of a tzaddik ben tzaddik is more readily accepted or on a higher level than tefillah ben tzaddik ben Rasha. When a tzaddik ben tzaddik and a tzaddik ben Rasha are davening for good health, there's no difference between their tefillos. In fact, perhaps the tefillah of the tzaddik ben Rasha is even higher. It's specifically in this context of what they were davening for here. The fact that they were asking for progeny was what caused their tefillos not to be of a higher level or lower level, but more quote-unquote easily accepted because of what we explained before. The fact that Yitzchak's tefillah was much easier to answer because all he was asking for is the continuation of the natural order, and he had a much clearer picture in his head, whereas Rivka didn't have as clear a model to follow, and her tefillah was a much more drastic one to go against the derech hateva. It's not that her tefillos wouldn't have been answered, but perhaps Yitzchak's tefillos were answered first. It comes to explain not only this passage in the Torah, but also the Gemara in Yevamos. It also connects well and is the beautiful conclusion to the earlier piece that we saw in Maayan Beit Hashoeva. He was explaining to us that when you think of the beginning of the story of progeny, you don't think of that birth alone, but you think of where their parents came from and grandparents, the whole chain of continuity. That is the story of the birth of a child. Very much connected to over here, where you see that their tefillos for progeny, even their desire for progeny, their request for progeny, was also connected to the images and to the life stories of those who came before them. They were cognizant of this piece. They were cognizant of this musar, of this lesson, even as they davened for a child, that their child's story would not begin with the birth, but their child's story began with them and with their parents and with everything that had come before it, sometimes trying to follow in that path, sometimes trying to break that path, but a story that begins there nonetheless. Shabbat Shalom.